I believe the biggest issue with Dandy's World's balancing comes from one of its fundamental mechanics: trinkets. For the unenlightened, trinkets are these little equipables you can activate before a run starts. They provide boosts that make your run much easier and faster. Depending on the toon you're using, you will want to be using different trinkets to better suit their strengths or weaknesses. As far as balancing goes, trinkets are... well... just look at the tier list, it's bad. You've got 6 trinkets that you'll almost always be using, 5 that are worth considering, and then you have every other trinket in the entire game. Now, to be fair, some of these trinkets synchronize with specific toons extremely well, such as GG and Bone, but the vast majority of them just sit there in your inventory taking up space, making it harder to find the trinkets you actually want to use. However, I believe that not all of the trinkets considered unviable are just plain bad. I think that for a lot of them, you simply don't have a reason to use them over any other trinket, and given a chance, they would in fact shine. I've divided the trinkets that I classified as unviable previously into a second tier list. From bottom to top, there's trinkets that are bad but don't need any changes, as they are either beginner trinkets or have some kind of X factor that makes their unviability justified. The trinkets that are, in fact, just plain bad and either need massive buffs or a rework. The trinkets that serve a decent purpose, but their effect is so minuscule that they aren't even worth using in the first place. And, last but not least, the trinkets that are actually pretty good. There's just no reason to use them over the higher tier trinkets. However, that's the issue. In order to give these trinkets a fair shot in the game's meta, we would either need to buff them to a rather extreme extent, or nerf the heck out of the F tier trinkets. Frankly, I don't like either of these options. A lot of the less powerful trinkets simply will never impact overall gameplay as much as the more powerful ones, buffed or not. I mean, think about it. Would you rather have a permanent extraction buff or one random item every floor that probably won't help you in the first place? And besides, rebalancing everything one by one would take such a long time. Luckily, I have a better idea to make these trinkets more commonly used by experienced players. My idea to fix trinket balancing, or at the very least make it slightly less abysmal, is something that has been discussed in the community for many months: a third trinket slot. The main reason most of these unviable trinkets are never used is because there are simply better trinkets to be using, and you never ever really want to try anything new because of how limiting it is to only have 2 slots. But Schmo, I can hear you saying, won't the meta grinders just use another overpowered trinket in their 3rd slot? This solves nothing. In fact, it arguably makes that issue even worse. Shut up. I'm getting to that. Yes, it is true that most people would just equip another extremely powerful trinket in their 3rd slot, which is why another mechanic would be introduced. Let me explain. This gets a little bit complex. On your screen right now are the 6 classes of trinkets. Each trinket fits into one of these 6 categories. This is important because in order to inject variety into your builds, you can only use the 3rd slot if your first 2 trinkets come from separate classes. For example, suppose this Finn wanted to make a trinket build. We will assume that he has access to all trinkets for the sake of simplicity. Because of his 4-star skill check, he considers using Magnifying Glass and Participation Award, a commonly used combo that heavily increases skill check, making machines much faster. However, while he would be allowed to do this, not restricting his creativity, his third trinket slot will be blocked off if he does. The thought of missing out on a potentially more powerful and varied build makes Finn sad, so instead he decides to put some variety into his build by swapping out the Participation Award for V's Remote. With his 3rd slot, he decides to use a less commonly used trinket! And then he picks Fishing Rod because players in public servers don't really seem to understand that a slight boost at the start of the game will never be worth a permanent boost throughout it. He chose Fishing Rod, making that kind of a bad example, but Finn could have just as easily selected a trinket like Pop Pack because it would help a lot with his 2-star stamina. Along with adding a third trinket slot, a ton of trinkets just need to be buffed or reworked. Even with added viability due to the third slot, a trinket like Coin Purse will never be worth a trinket slot unless it's buffed significantly. I've got a ton of ideas for reworks and buff, but I don't really feel like just reading a bunch of words that are on screen, so I'm going to show 2 at a time for 10 seconds each. Pause if you really care about any of them, skip to the timestamp on screen if you don't.